And we are back, dear viewers, on this beautiful evening here on Hala Kuwait. We're joined by Yousef Almeer, a director, filmmaker, and also a storyteller here in our beautiful state of Kuwait. Good evening to you, Yousef. It's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Good evening, Yousef, and thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And first, Yousef Almeer, would love to know all about your journey and how you ended up being as a filmmaker and also a director.
Well, I had my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, Penn State, and I found that I really loved and was drawn to directing from the moment I made my first short film while taking a class there. And so I explored it further by going to film school at the New York Film Academy in Los Angeles. And I took the filmmaking program there, and it's very intensive, a year of making films nonstop, but I learned a lot from that experience, and it fed a lot of my experience and know-how, technical knowledge of filmmaking and storytelling, and I would love to apply it here in Kuwait.
All right, that's pretty interesting actually. You gained all this experience, as you mentioned, from New York, between all these great, magnificent directors over there. I'm sure you're bringing all the good stuff here back to Kuwait. So as a storyteller, you mentioned, would love to ask you, what does storytelling actually mean to you, and how do you describe it to the crowd?
Well, I think storytelling is the most instinctive way of, conveying information. And our ancestors used to, huddle around the fire and tell each other stories and share stories, not just as a means of entertainment, but also conveying lessons and morals and, culture. And even us, like the folk stories of our ancestors still live today and we still tell them. It's because that's tied to our culture and our land. And I think it's also the most influential way of conveying information. It's not just purely expression, it's also about identity and, culture and history.
Yes, definitely. Really beautifully said from you that you mentioned that the past, they used to gather around the fire or maybe their sea journeys and tell stories about the past. Especially here in our beautiful Kuwait, we have a lot of things to tell about our past. So Yousef Almeer, as a director also and a filmmaker, and you pick your storytelling mode, and there's definitely a unique voice that you have to tune in, either to share it on TV, for example, or radio as a storytelling, or even any social media platform. How would you pick the definite voice for that story itself?
Well, my voice, I think, is for me, I have a unique perspective, I think, because I've lived outside of Kuwait studying abroad. I feel like I had an outsider's perspective as well, and that made me really more appreciative of, Kuwait and its culture. And when I was, missing my home, I started to really look into the things that reminded me of it and really defined Kuwait. For me, it was, the media TV shows of like the 80s and the 90s, and even the Khaliji music of that time. And even, I think it's also, I'm very influenced by the memories of growing up in Kuwait here in, the 2000s. And that nostalgia really influences a lot of my work.
All right, well, welcome back to Kuwait, Yousef. We're glad to have you back here in Kuwait.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we're going to gain from your experience that you learned back in the States. So when you want to do a storytelling story here in Kuwait, and the stories that naturally draw your attention, you mentioned something from the past, from the culture. How do you pick your stories?
Well, I think the best stories are the ones that entertain you first, and then leave you something to think about afterwards. I think it's important, I think stories in general are vessels for bigger ideas, so that they can be portrayed in a simple way for us to understand. But they have to draw you in emotionally first to really grab your attention.
All right, so in your point of view, Yousef, does every story have a hidden message inside of it?
Well, I think the best ones really do, but it's not necessary. I think the most important thing is, again, the entertainment value, because if it's not there, there's nothing for you to really to start paying attention to, and the message is lost in that.
All right. So as a director, Yousef Almeer, and you see all these different stories around you, how would you pick a definite story or a specific one, and maybe put it in a film or a book, or how would you specify it?
You know, it really changes from time to time. Sometimes I picture a scene, and that leads me to start asking questions, you know, about like what these two characters are like talking about, or you know, what allowed them to be there. You know, and I think, like for me, there's many different sources of inspiration. Sometimes it's a character, sometimes you know, it's just one shot. Sometimes it comes to me like in a dream. So it varies, you know.
All right, that's really inspiring. If you get especially a story from a dream, it's really creative, and I think you've never seen it out there, yeah?
Well, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of filmmakers that get inspiration from their dreams.
All right, great to hear from you, Yousef. And Yousef, now you mentioned something here about Kuwait and its rich culture in the past. And how important do you think it is, from your point of view, to make these films now and include the national identity in it?
Well, I think it's important that Kuwait is represented by Kuwaitis. I think we have, you know, cultural nuances and traditions that are difficult for someone to understand that didn't grow up here. And you know, for me, I try to, as much as I can, portray that in a truthful way, because I don't think that it's really conveyed truthfully nowadays. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's important to you know, invest in a new generation of filmmakers that can really depict the way that life is in Kuwait now and even before, through the lens of someone that is from here and, you know, grew up here and lived here.
Yes, and definitely from experiencing you said a school back in New York. I'm sure you're gonna pass on something new here in Kuwait. So as a director also, Yousef, and maintaining a story while conveying it to the crowd, how do you balance between the real story and the authentic meaning that you want to share in the film?
Well, I think that both help each other. I think that they, you know, it's important for, you know, visually, the visual beauty to accentuate the emotional core. And, you know, without that emotional core, the beauty and the visuals are just, you know, nice pictures. You have to really be drawn emotionally first for them to have a deeper meaning or really be a bigger part of the picture.
All right, beautifully said. And we want to really hear a story from you, and how that story changed your point of view in storytelling and also filmmaking itself.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think there's so many, and it changes with time. I get inspiration from a lot of things. I think there's, you know, one that comes to mind is, you know, something that I've experienced, and it's just a very simple thing, you know. Maybe 10 years ago, I was walking down the street and I saw this mother and, you know, her daughter holding hands and walking down the street, and, you know, the daughter was looking up to that mother and smiling, and the mother looked back and smiled like, you know, she's waiting her whole life just to experience this moment. And, you know, it was a busy street, but no one saw this beautiful, tender, small moment. And, you know, for me, it really started making me question, you know, like, what did this woman have to sacrifice, and what did she go through to just get to this moment? And for me, that was, you know, I started to picture it in scenes like a movie. And that really gave me the perspective of, you know, a director's job. Like, what a director's job is to show these, you know, these moments when in life that maybe passes by us, we don't pay attention to.
Right, that very specific moment that you said, the daughter looking at her mom, I'm sure it passed through like 10 seconds from your thoughts and onto a paper, for example. If you want to sketch it out, would you detail it in seconds for a movie, or a 10-second story to tell? How would you scale that moment?
Well, it really depends, you know, like I think you have to think about the context of that one scene and throughout the whole movie. So how important is that scene to the whole story?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it could be the end of the story, like the story is about this woman, and you know that her whole life she wanted to be a mother and to you know, give happiness to her child, because maybe she was missing that when she was a child. And so you see this whole movie and this whole story of this woman going through her life just wanting to have this single moment, and at the end you see her just, you know, holding hands and just smiling. But the context of that just one scene has a deeper meaning and a bigger meaning.
All right, and also you have to fixate that she is from Kuwait, and you have to put in all this national identity inside the story to make it appear like in Kuwait, right?
Well, yes, you know, I think it's a given, depending on, you know, what I think about and what inspires me at that moment.
All right, great insights from you, Yousef Almeer, and I'm sure dear viewers, you're all enjoying this lovely interview here with our guest. But next, dear viewers, we're going to take a look at this inspiring report, and we shall be back to ask Yousef Almeer more questions. Stay tuned. Welcome back, dear viewers, and still on this beautiful evening, we're joined by Yousef Almeer, a director, filmmaker, and a storyteller here in our beautiful Kuwait. So, Yousef, we spoke off air a little bit before about the media and how it's changing the perspective of people, and especially that when outside of Kuwait people watch media in Kuwait, how do they think, and what would you like to change about that?
Well, you know, I think it's an important question to ask ourselves, because, you know, in a time like now where there's globalization and Western influence and on the rise as a trend, and it's important for us to really define ourselves in our own terms and take control of our own narrative so that other people don't take it for us. You know, I don't think that there's enough truthful representation of what life in Kuwait is now. You know, like we're just like everyone else. We're humans, you know, and it's important to show the complexities in our society and our culture, and you know, the truthful way of like how we interact and speak with each other. And you know, for me, I took the knowledge of you know, Hollywood, and I want to apply it to Kuwaiti stories. You know, I think Kuwaitis are natural storytellers, and we have you know, even in the way that we interact every day, that's how we include stories, and it's very, for me, that's very important, because I think, you know, we're some of the greatest stories. We have some of the greatest stories in the world, and I think it's for the right person at the right time to come and tell these stories. That's why I think it's important to invest in you know, in the next generation of filmmakers, of Kuwaiti film storytellers, so that we can be able to tell our stories in our own terms.
All right, hopefully, and I'm sure Yousef Almeer, I'm really glad to interview you here on Hala Kuwait, and we've met a lot of filmmakers here in Kuwait, especially from the newer generation, as you mentioned, and they participated in these film awards. And I'm sure you also participated in these film awards. So in the film you make yourself, what message would you put inside of it as a Kuwaiti perception to convey it to the crowd?
You know, we're just like everyone else, I think, and we're all humans. We go through the same things, and you know, for me, it's important to in my work that I show how we speak. You know, in our everyday lives, and you know, we're not like the TV shows. We don't interact that way. We're more our truth, you know, is more grounded. You know, our real life is more grounded than that, and that's why it's important for me to convey that. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of people that maybe even in Kuwait that don't give Kuwaiti films, feature films, a chance because you know, there's before, and this is something that was said by Mr. Dawood Shahil, which was a friend of mine. That he said that like there's a lot of people that are making these feature films that come from TV, and so it's kind of like soap operas but in feature film forms. And for me, it's important for us to invest in the future generation to be able to, you know, go and get the technical knowledge from outside, you know, from different countries that have a better ability in terms of technical knowledge to make films, and bring that here and tell, you know, our stories in our own way.
All right, so Yousef, Almeer, I'm sure you just recently came back from the United States, so you're from the newer generation that have studied these technicalities, as you mentioned, as a filmmaker. So when you come back here, do you find it easy to make a message or a movie and convey it to the crowd and, for example, share your movie in the theaters?
Well, it's a long process, you know, and it's for me, I'm still learning from this. There's a lot of people that you know, have had experiences that I learned from, you know, as mentors. But you know, nowadays it's easier to get on streaming than it is to get in the theaters. But it's important to have that theatrical experience. Every filmmaker dreams of it. So you know, I hope to one day make a feature film. You know, hopefully soon. I have something in the works, but you know, it takes a lot of time and technical knowledge, and really to really have the ability to tell a story confidently, and not to repeat the mistakes of, you know, people in the past in terms of storytelling.
All right, that's really great to hear from you, and I'm sure all of you dear viewers here watching us are really waiting to see a film from Yousef, Almeer. So Yousef, when the international audience wants to look at Kuwait and in a movie, what would you insert in that movie to change their conceptions or their misconceptions?
Well, I'd show them the everyday life, you know, like I think that we're a special people, a complex people that, you know, deserve to have our stories told in that format. And, you know, I hope that one day, you know, you go to theaters outside of Kuwait and you see Kuwaiti films, and that's appreciated by, you know, audiences abroad as well as here. You know, I hope that's a dream of mine, you know.
Inshallah, hopefully. So Yousef, now we live in a fast-paced world. You know, the technology is up there. You can look at everything online. So when you want to pass a message or a film, would you pass it on a large-scale production or just a short story?
Well, you know, I think there's room for both. You know, I think now more than ever we have access to great international stories and films that, you know, because of streaming, but also there's a great demand for you know, larger productions and larger theaters like IMAX, and you know, even I think both can live simultaneously, because you know, the theater is a communal experience, but also streaming provides, you know, a different perspective, which I think it's important in a time like now.
All right, so Yousef, Almeer, also as a director and a filmmaker, and you want to go ahead and pick your actors. How would you pick your actors exactly?
Well, I cast based on mostly the actor's ability to really understand the character. Right. You know, in Kuwait, I found that there's a lot of people that, in terms of, you know, the crew or you know, the directors, they don't really give a chance for the actors to get into the character, and they don't do rehearsals. And I think that's a mistake, because you know, if you give the actors a chance and your crew a chance, and you give them the artistic space, I think that they will deliver. And I think it's also important to watch films, not just from Hollywood, but everywhere else in the world. So because that informs your ability to tell stories, not just as a director for me, but also as an actor for the actors.
All right, some beautiful information here you shared, Yousef. So in your stories or the films you made or you want to make soon, how would you hope to leave a legacy for the future generation here in Kuwait?
You know, I hope for them to really do themselves justice. You know, to have ambition, to really push themselves to be the best version of who they want to be. You know, to choose discomfort, not to live in the box that society sets for them just because it's comfortable. You know, I think it's important for us to really go out there and take initiative and learn the tools and really be able to do ourselves and our country and our culture justice. You know, I think it's very important for us to do that. I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of the creative potential in Kuwait, and you know, it's for the next generation to take that torch and carry it forward. You know, when you talk about legacy, what is legacy but a story?
Mm-hmm. All right, really great. I'm sure from your future productions, I'm sure the international audience is going to be surprised by your creativity, mashallah. And I'm sure our dear viewers here are also enjoying everything that you're saying, and we're getting inspired by you. So Yousef, when you want to produce something here about Kuwait especially, and maybe you want to include all the Gulf really in your message, because we share the media here in the GCC countries with one message, and peace is our message, right? So what story would you choose as for Kuwait, and what would you portray it as?
Well, we have a complicated and complex history that led to how we live now. And you know, there's a lot of great stories in Kuwait, and true Kuwaiti heroes that deserve their stories to be told, you know, as a film. But if I had to just choose one, I think I'd choose Al-Ghazu, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, because you know, I think it's showed us as a people who we are. You know, it's a story about resilience. You know, it's a story about when times were tough, we did not fold, and we really held our heads up high. And that really inspires me, and that really, you know, touches me as a Kuwaiti and as a filmmaker, because this is truthfully at our core who we are.
Inshallah, you picked on a good message there to share with the world. And may Allah Almighty rest all the souls of the martyrs in peace, and further continue the security and prosperity that we have now in our beautiful Kuwait. So Yousef, Almeer, a last message from you for our dear viewers watching today.
I think it's important for you to really go out and do the best that you can. Be the best version of yourself, and you know, be truthful to who you are. Live to your potential. Don't let society set your limits. You know, we're usually defined by one thing, but you know, who's to say that? Why can't you be 2 or 3? You know, it's important for you to really live out your dreams, and because life is short. You know, it's important for you to really do the things that you want in your life. That's my final message. And you know, for all the young filmmakers out there that would like any guidance or anything, you can contact me on Instagram at Yousefist, which is Yousefist. You know, I do have a group of young up-and-coming filmmakers, and I would love for people to connect. So if you would love to get into the filmmaking industry, or just have an idea for a film that you would love to help, you know, have guidance for, please contact me.
Inshallah. Thank you for your lovely message there for us, really, and our dear viewers. Really inspired us today here, Yousef. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So, dear viewers, let's all thank the coming of our guest, Yousef Almeer, a director, filmmaker, and a storyteller here in our beautiful state of Kuwait. And next, dear viewers, we shall take a look at this report, and we shall be back. Stay tuned.